If you've got a really warped board like this, but no joiner, I want to show you a super simple way to mill this down to flat, usable lumber. Now, if I were to take this piece of wood and run it directly through the planer, you might think that it's going to make it flat, but it's actually not. The way that a planer works is it has rollers here that help move the material in and out. Those rollers put downward pressure onto the wood, and as the wood progresses through the machine, it slowly shaves off a small amount from the top that is parallel to the bottom surface here. That's exactly what I'm looking for in this though, right? Well, kind of, but there's one small problem, so let's take a closer look. So if you ran this through the planer, it would start working just fine, and the rollers would put downward pressure on it, which then is gonna tip this board a little bit. As it gets further and further in, it's gonna keep putting downward pressure on it, and it's gonna start to move. So the issue is that this won't have a flat surface, and when this comes through the other side of the planer, it's actually gonna be crooked. I know that no one ever believes me, so let me show you how it actually turns out.
Hold on to your butts.
To be completely honest, it really looks like it's gonna work as I'm running the board through, but I've done this enough times to know that it's not gonna work. That looks pretty good, right? Well, no, let's take a closer look. So if I grab that piece of wood and set it on something that I know is super flat, like the cast iron part of my table saw, you can see that this still isn't flat. So now that I've shown you that running a piece of wood just through the planer doesn't actually work, I want to show you my super simple solution that allows you to mill even super warped boards like this perfectly flat without joint. So what you need to do is find a way to just support this board as you run it through the planer so it doesn't rock side to side at all. And if you're anything like me, you probably already have a ton of flat stuff already laying around in your garage. And if you can't figure out what it is yet, well, it's sheet goods. The reason that you buy this stuff is because you know that it's flat. So all that you need is a flat piece that will fully support the size of the board you're using. And on the back, I attached a simple piece of wood that'll keep the stock from shooting off of the sled as it runs through the planer. Now, since we know that the sheet good is gonna be perfectly flat running through the planer, we need to find a way to stabilize this piece from wobbling back and forth.
Wobble, baby, wobble, baby.
So what I'll do is just grab some small offcuts of wood and put it underneath all of the high spots. And now that this piece is shimmed and it's not moving at all, we can run it through the planer. But we should probably hold everything down with some hot glue first. I've actually seen some folks use screws from the underside, and while that's a perfectly viable method, it makes me really nervous to potentially run screws through my planer and then hit them, and that's probably something I'm gonna avoid. Plus, I got like 50 sticks of hot glue from Harbor Freight for like $2. I'll leave a link in the description to this cordless hot glue gun that really comes in handy for this exact task. I go pretty heavy on the glue here because as the glue cools and hardens, it actually helps support the board as I run it through the planer. Then I simply flip the board over and butt it against the back stop. I'll look around for those high spots and toss a little bit more hot glue in those places, followed by some wood shims. These are just cut-off pieces that I save in a drawer for this exact reason. Just ignore how messy the drawer is. Anyway, with the board fully supported and shimmed out, I can run this contraption back through the planer. Now, I intentionally made this board unbelievably messed up, so I'm gonna have to remove a ton of material to get this top surface flat. In reality, I highly doubt you would ever be working with lumber anywhere close to being this warped, but I wanted to show you that this technique works even in the most extreme situations. That seemed like it took forever, but the board is now perfectly flat and parallel to those planer blades. So now that this board is perfectly flat, you can pry it off with a putty knife. Now, the main reason I prefer to use melamine over something like MDF or plywood is because the laminate surface on top makes it super easy to scrape off all the hot glue and reuse it. And just to prove that this is actually flat, Yeah, I'd say that's dead flat. So now that we have one perfectly flat surface, we can run that back through the planer and get that top side perfectly flat too. But before you run it through the planer, make sure to take off as much of this glue and extra pieces of wood that you can. If you skip this step, you'll have things flying around inside your planer and probably shoot back out at you. Ask me how I know. And now you're basically at the exact same step you would be if you owned a joint. Just simply run the board through the planer and you're all set. Want to know a hack for getting those edges perfectly jointed without owning a joiner? Check out this video up here on the cards or link down in the description below. And now you've got yourself a perfectly flat and milled board.